Today, I'm going to talk about my role as a CRA in academia and the responsibilities that I had in the role. Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Banker, also known as That Clinical Research Girl, and I'm here to help others like you break into the clinical research field. So if you're a transitioning professional, you're a final year student, or you're a new graduate, keep watching because this is the place for you. So firstly, you're probably wondering, what is a CRA? A CRA is also known as a clinical research associate. So what a clinical research associate does is we monitor trials from startup to close out. So you'll be dealing with all monitoring related queries. You'll be writing up reports of when you've done a site visit to a hospital, for example. You would be doing a task called source data verification, where you're looking at source, which is a database with patient records, and you're comparing it to a case report form or a data collection form where the site team have inputted data for the patient, and you're just checking you're checking the database to see that it matches what's on the ECRF. So in that process, you'd probably have to pick up on discrepancies and you'd flag that with the site on the database. You'd raise a query. For example, I'd raise a query that says something like, please consider reviewing and amending the date of this hospital visit as per the source or as per the patient's medical record. And these are the kind of discrepancies you'd raise as a clinical research associate going on a monitoring visit to a site. Then you'd also have to write up a report of what you did at that visit. So you would talk about maybe who you saw at the visit. You would say what documents were in the folder, anything that was missing. You would tell them that they need to file it by the next visit. You'd probably pick up on documents where, like, if the old version is in there but the newer versions are not in there, you'd have to say, okay, yeah, can you please file the new versions in the folder before the next visit. This folder is also known as an investigator trial file or investigator site file. So this is the terminology we use for the file that's at the site. When I was a CRA, I was monitoring 3 different trials to start off with. So I had a trial that was in closeout, a trial that was being routinely monitored, and a trial that was starting up. So with the trial that was starting up, we had 1 site at the time, but now it has 4 sites. And with the trial that's being routinely monitored, I also had 1 site. And the trial that was closing down, I had 4 sites. So with the trial that was starting up, I was involved with setting up documents such as the enrollment form that the site is going to complete when they recruit or find a potential patient. I was also creating the informed consent log to give to the site. I would create the delegation and training log to give to the site, and I'll also create a screening and enrollment log to give to the site, and even a site visit log. Another log as well is a subject ID log. So these different documents were what we as sponsor would provide to the site to collect the patient information for our trial master file. So that's the document that we use on the sponsor side. So with this site that was being set up, we got to a point where the trial was open to recruitment, and I had the joy of registering the first few patients on that trial. So as soon as the first patient comes on, it's our job as a CRA to go to that site and monitor everything to do with that patient at the site within the first month of the patient joining the trial. And this was as per our monitoring plan. So we had a strict monitoring plan that would follow, that would tell us how the frequency of monitoring visits, how to monitor critical data such as anything that happens within the first 2 cycles or at screening, adverse events and concomitant medications. Then we'd also have things such as other non-critical data that need to be monitored as and when. We also had monitoring depending on the site that you had to go to. We also had specifics that were relevant to that trial as well. So then for my next trial, which was being routinely monitored, so it was already set up and monitoring visits were happening once a month on site and once a month at the pharmacy. And when I went on site visits, I would check the investigator trial files. So I would see that documents were filed I would check the monitoring visit actions from the last report and mark them off as resolved, ongoing, or I would create new actions as well. I would hold meetings with the data manager, the study manager, or the principal investigator as and when needed. This didn't have to happen all the time, but if I had any concerns or if I needed to speak to them about something in particular, I would set up these meetings with them beforehand. Even before these visits, I'll probably send the actions to them and say, please can you resolve these actions ahead of my visit, just to give them the heads up that I was coming for my visit. So for another trial that I had, that was at closeout. So I had 4 sites that I was closing out, and I was doing them all remotely except for one. So one of the sites, we had a CRA that was doing the closeout for us because this was outside of the UK. And then the other 3 sites, I was in charge of doing the closeout. So I would review the monitoring visit letter from the last visit and just go through each action until we completely resolved each action, and until it was a point where I would only have about 3 or 4 actions left, and I could put that on a site declaration form where I'd list those 3 or 4 actions or so, and then it would be sent off in a site declaration form to the principal investigator, who would tick it off and say, yeah, I'm happy, these actions have now been resolved by the site members. I also would send out a closeout visit letter as well, and I would send out an ITF close down checklist for them to use alongside closing out that site. And these were some of the tasks that I completed as part of closing out the trial, amongst many other activities. So across these 3 trials, you do common tasks such as having study team meetings bi-weekly. So as a CRA, I'll just report any monitoring findings that I wanted to report to the trial manager or the program manager, and anything that I felt like I might need their help to escalate further and work towards developing an action plan to get actions resolved. I would talk to them about my monitoring visits and anything that came up from there, keep them up to date with my monitoring visit schedule. I'll talk about any serious adverse events that I've picked up or noted from the site, and discuss anything that needs to be discussed with them or with the pharmacovigilance officer as well. I would have to report on my monitoring, so the SDVing that I'm doing regularly, and just showing that I'm keeping up to date with SDVing. And I would also request any help that I might need, or any further advice or any tips from senior members of the team. And that's basically what our study team meetings would involve. I would also be present at investigator teleconference meetings where the trial manager would lead the meeting to where the sites would provide an update with how the patients are doing at the site, and I would be the one taking the minutes and doing this alongside the trial manager. There's many other tasks that CRAs can get involved in. We also, like I've mentioned before, we write reports, and we are just there to really deal with any monitoring related queries at the end of the day. We also troubleshoot any questions the sites have about the protocol. They would ask us, and it would be our job to look in the protocol and try and find the answer. If we can't find the answer, the next person we'd go to is the clinical trial manager for help. Again, if the clinical trial manager couldn't provide that help, the next person would be the chief investigator, who is the one that wrote the protocol and probably has the answer that we're looking for. So as a CRA within academia, it's a bit different from those in industry. So I work within the sponsor team, and the sponsor would provide things such as the funding and the oversight and the regulatory requirements for the study. The trial would be funded by whereas in industry it might be funded by a pharma company, for example. We did less traveling as we were part of the sponsor team, whereas in industry you'd probably travel more as a CRA. And when I was a CRA, I was probably traveling up to maybe one or two times a month. But in industry, I know you can probably travel up to 6 or 8 times a month. My team is probably made up of about 20 people. So we have clinical trial assistants, clinical research associates, clinical trial managers, clinical trial program managers, a pharmacovigilance officer, a clinical operations officer. We also have data managers, and we have the deputy head of the investigator-initiated trials team and the head of the investigator-initiated trials team. As a CRA, as well as doing site visits, writing up reports, performing source data verification, I would also be in charge of making sure that the trial master file that we hold as the sponsor is up to date in terms of filing. So I would make sure I set up meetings in my calendar to file any documents that need to be filed that I've collected within the week, and just keeping it up to date, making sure all versions are filed, making sure we're audit ready, inspection ready, and I would log this in a spreadsheet to show that I've done my review of the trial master file. And that was another responsibility that I had, another big responsibility that I had as a CRA. So this is a lot of what I did as a CRA 1. Then when I progressed to CRA 2, I picked up a bit more responsibilities, and that included picking up a phase 3 oncology trial. So the previous trials that I had as a CRA 1 were phase 1 oncology trials within cancers such as prostate cancer, melanoma, glioblastoma, cervical cancer, and different kind of cancers, whereas this phase 3 trial was mainly a breast cancer trial, and this time it composed of 12 different sites, and I was one amongst 4 CRAs who had to travel to sites in the UK. So this was the first time that I got to travel to sites that were outside of England. So I got to go to Scotland, for example, and I went to 2 sites in Scotland, as well as 1 site in Manchester. And I used a electronic case report form called Open Clinica, and I was able to perform my source data verification using that system and comparing that with the patient records at the sites or the hospitals where I perform my monitoring visits. I also took on the responsibility to lead standard operating procedures and guidance reviews within the CRAs and CTAs team. So I would set up probably weekly or bi-weekly meetings to review SOPs that needed to be reviewed every 2 years or so. And we would review the SOPs process together and see how we can probably improve it, or see where we can probably keep it the same, or give suggestions for what we can add. And yeah, that was really my responsibility. That's really where I stepped up my level of responsibility in the CRA 2 role as well. As a CRA, it was so fun. I had opportunities such as going abroad to the AACR conference, which is a cancer conference that was being held in Orlando at the time. I went for 6 days with the clinical trial manager on the study that was being presented there. The study was being presented by the clinical fellow on the trial, and I had the opportunity to watch them present the poster, but also have the opportunity to develop my oncology knowledge and really get a deeper understanding of what oncology research is about, and networking and connecting with people from all over the world who also had the same interests in oncology. And this was amazing to attend, and it really was the highlight of my CRA experience. So as a CRA, it was so important to do our work in accordance with regulatory requirements, such as the MHRA, the Medicines Healthcare Regulatory Agency, in accordance with the Health Research Authority, also known as the HRA, and in accordance with the Research Ethics Committee, also known as the REC. And alongside performing my work in accordance with these regulatory requirements, I would also have to do it in accordance with good clinical practice. So that's it, guys. I hope this breakdown of my role as a CRA in academia really helps you to understand it a bit more and give you a perspective of how it differs from CRAs in industry. If you have any questions, drop it in the comments. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow me for more. Bye.